Our talk today will be about the Israeli-Palestinian war, its causes, history, and what is the solution to it. Currently, we are watching a surge all over the world in the mass actions of solidarity to the Palestinian people against the Israeli occupation of Palestine lands, against the terrible crimes of the Israeli occupation forces in the Gaza Strip, including the bombing of Gaza hospitals, a Greek Orthodox church, a United Nations school, Red Cross facilities, etc. As a result of the constant bombing of civilian buildings by Israeli armed forces, we have more than 9,000 Palestinians dead. Among them, 4,500 children and more than 2,000 women. In Gaza now, one Palestinian child is killed every 10 minutes. In view of this barbarity, the slogan, "Freedom to Palestine," is heard loud and clear by millions of people throughout the world. Solidarity is the common weapon of the people against injustice, suppression, and exploitation. Communists and progressive people all over the world are leading the struggle for a free and independent Palestinian state in the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem, its capital, so the refugees can return to their ancestral homes and thousands of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails be freed, for the Palestinian people to be masters of their own state, to overthrow the Israeli occupation, and to finally win its national and social liberation. I will return to this important aspect of the issue later. A few days ago, the 23rd International Meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties approved unanimously a joint statement of solidarity to the people of Palestine and called upon peoples of the world to follow immediately the road of struggle to organize mass mobilizations against the Israeli offensiveness. The statement also points out, I quote, "The occupation of Palestinian lands by Israel, supported by American NATO imperialism, constitutes the source of sufferings of the Palestinian people and all peoples of the region, as well as the occupation. As long as the occupation continues, the conflict will continue, the people will be prevented from living in peace, they will live in danger of finding themselves in the whirlwind of a wider general war." And the quote, "The government of the so-called Western world and their mass media try desperately to convince the people that everything started on 7th of October with the attack by Hamas into Israel. This is utilized by the official propaganda by Israel and all those who support it in order to deceive the people. The truth is, however, that the slaughter of the Palestinian people lasts for over 7 decades and commenced with the division of Palestinian land in 1947-1948 by the United Nations decision, which led to the foundation of the State of Israel, thus opening the road for the gradual grab of Palestinian lands by the State of Israel. Millions of Palestinians were thrown out of their homes and became refugees, the majority ending up in numerous refugee camps in the neighboring countries. We are talking here about a real large-scale uprooting and planned displacement of a whole population of 7 million people from their country. Israel took over 774 Palestinian towns and villages, of which 531 were completely destroyed and the rest were passed on to the occupying state. Millions of people who remained in their place, both in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, found themselves living for generations in a regime of blockades, great deprivations, in one word, in an apartheid regime. On the Palestinian lands occupied by Israel were built and are still building settlements which act as tools of expansion and consolidation of occupation and suppression of the whole people. Actually, 40% of the West Bank, which is itself divided in 3 security zones by the occupying forces, is today in the hands of settlers who have been multiplied 7-fold since the signature of the Oslo agreements in 1993. From 115,000 then, the settlers reached 750,000. In 1967, the United Nations decided that the state of Palestine should be established alongside the state of Israel, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and defined its borders. However, Israel disregards every right of the Palestinian people to establish a Palestinian state according to the UNO decisions. The objective is to suppress, exterminate, and expel the remnants of the Palestinian people from their land. It is worth mentioning that the Gaza Strip is blockaded since 2007, and only in the period 2009 to 2022 has been subjected to 93 days of total Israeli bombardments, with tragic results: 4,240 dead and 22,902 wounded, according to official records. The blockade is complete from the land and the sea, and the Gaza enclave has no electricity or water supply of its own and must rely on Israel for such supplies. The criminal state of Israel allows the flow of water and electricity for a few hours per day. Furthermore, the water that flows into Gaza is not clean and suitable for human consumption. Even food and medical supplies must be imported from Israel in quantities allowed by the occupying forces. In periods of Israeli attacks in Gaza, these supplies are seized completely. We must pose the question here: why is all this happening? Some people prefer the simplistic and disorienting theory of the war of religions. According to this theory, the conflict is between the Hebrew or Hebrew Christian culture and the Muslim one. There is no greater deception than that. This approach wipes out the real class contradictions, the class struggle that is the real motive force of history. The various Abraham agreements signed in the last few years by a number of Arabic Muslim states with Israel, aiming at increasing the profits of capitalists, both Arab and Jews, underlying the expedient naivety of such approaches, as well as the recent assistance given by the Hebrew Israel to the Muslim Azerbaijan in order to crush the Christian Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. It is therefore not the war of religions responsible, but imperialism. After the end of World War II, the capitalist pair, which became the strongest country of the capitalist world, the USA, chose to make a strong geopolitical support in the region, a policeman of some sort, which could deal, even by the use of violence, with the other bourgeois states of the countries formed following the fall of colonization under the influence of the victory of the Soviet Union over the fascist and Nazi powers. Thus, the USA and other Western powers found in Israel the ally they needed, who gave them the right of control over the other bourgeois countries of the region, who were also looking for upgrading their status. Now, there is a dirty geopolitical game is played with even worse consequences following the overthrow of socialism in the USSR. And this geopolitical game has its victims in the whole Palestinian people that all these years have been promised a country of their own, but this dream remains unfulfilled. The people of Israel also suffers because they are themselves victims of the policies followed by the Israeli bourgeois class and its state. We therefore need to express our solidarity with the Communist Party of Israel, the Israeli communists, both Hebrews and Arabs, who are currently struggling against a pack of wolves, and they raise a voice of resistance against the barbarity suffered by the people of Palestine. Under these circumstances, what should the people of Palestine do? Should they choose the subjugation to Israel, do nothing, and wait to be slaughtered by the Israeli armed forces and the armed settlers? The duty demands to follow the road of resistance, disobedience, that besides the political has an armed dimension as well. For many years now, that a bitter, bloody war is conducted against the crime and the slaughter practiced by the State of Israel against the people of Palestine. Let me point out here that the UN Charter specifies that the principles of self-determination of people is unquestionable, and that any people under occupation by another state is prevented from exercising his fundamental right has every right to resist the occupation by all means, including armed force. This is exactly what the Palestinian people are doing, and in doing so, they are within the framework of international justice. In addition, I must also point out that what Israel is doing in Gaza now, according to the UN definition, constitutes crimes of war, and according to the definition by the International Penal Court, it constitutes genocide. Some people pretend to ignore all the above facts, and they seem to have discovered extreme acts and atrocities committed by Hamas after its incursion into Israel. What about the atrocities by the State of Israel against the Palestinian people all these years? They talk about the terrorism by Hamas, ignoring the fact that Hamas's activities, deplorable as they might be, are a reaction to the large-scale terrorism exercised by the State of Israel for decades. The collective punishment of 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza is justified by Israel as a war against Hamas's terrorism. However, there is no Hamas in the West Bank, but the Israeli crimes against the Palestinians there are just the same. As mentioned earlier, 40% of the area in the West Bank has been taken over by Israeli settlers. 100,000 of Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank by Israeli forces over the years. Today, there are more than 5,000 Palestinian political prisoners in Israeli jails, including hundreds of children and women, most of them from the West Bank. Where were all these supporters of Israel when Israeli soldiers were killing like birds the little Palestinian children with the slings during the Intifada? Don't they understand that decades of suppression and misery will give birth to the huge, justified, and uncontrolled anger of the oppressed people? We must clarify one important issue here. The war is not between Hamas and Israel, but between the Palestinians and Israel. Hamas came into existence in 1982. Before then, there was no Hamas anywhere. However, a war was waged by the State of Israel against the Palestinian people decades before Hamas came into existence. When we talk about the war, we must not focus exclusively on the savagery, because war is savage by its own nature, but focus on what classes and for what purpose they conduct the war. We are with the working class and the popular strata who are struggling in the occupied Palestinian land for establishing their own free state. More than that, we must reject categorically and emphatically every piece of dirty propaganda by the Israeli mass media, which is reproduced by the anti-people governments of the Euro-Atlantic bloc, for beheading of children, parading children in cages, etc., which are later proven to be fake news. They were even caught to present wounded children of Gaza as children in Israel. Let us not forget that the first victim of war is the truth, and the greatest lies are said in times of war. Let me remind you that in the past years, imperialist interventions and wars were sustained by lies about savageries. In 1990, the electronic media worldwide showed in direct transmission from the American Capitolio a nurse from Kuwait who, with tears in her eyes, was confirming the slaughter of babies by the Iraqi troops. This evidence was used to justify the US war in Iraq, against Iraq, together with the lies about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Years later, it was revealed that the young woman was not a nurse in the Middle East, but the daughter of the ambassador of Kuwait in the USA. Some people are wondering whether the international developments are somehow related to the situation in Palestine. In this regard, we must point out the conflict for the leadership of the world imperialist system between the two great imperialist forces, USA and China, as well as the fact that certain events are utilized or situations are created for serving the one or the other side of the dual polar conflict. It was obvious that the USA attached special attention to the so-called Abraham agreements between the State of Israel and Arab states of the region. This is so because the Abraham agreements, among other things, are connected with the US war planning, wider planning, in their rivalry with China in the battle for the division of markets in the Middle East and Europe, which is connected with the so-called Indian Road that rests upon the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel, in competition to the Chinese BRI or Silk Road. This is the real reason for America's insistence on Israel to enter and complete these agreements. These agreements are the tool in the hands of US imperialism for winning the commercial war with the rival imperialist force, China, by preventing the completion of the Chinese Silk Road or building an alternate trade route in competition with the Silk Road. This is the kind of game that is played in this area of the world. With regards the popular argument used by the State of Israel and other Western governments that of the right of Israel to self-defense is hypocritical, to say the least. If Israel has the right of self-defense, so has the Palestinian people. As I pointed out earlier, the right to resist occupation, even by armed force, is validated by the UN Charter. Besides, self-defense does not mean slaughtering the whole Palestinian people in Gaza, the killing of thousands of children and women. Actually, the criminal state of Palestine has no right to self-defense at all, because They are an occupying force. They are the oppressors. They trying to stop by violent means another people from gaining its freedom and its free state. Only the Palestinians have the right to self-defense. We can see from all the evidence presented above that this is a very complex issue. We must define the real cause of this issue. The real causes of this the real cause is none other than the Israeli occupation of Palestine lands and the violent prevention of the implementation of the UN decisions for the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel. This now brings us to the question, what is the solution to this difficult problem? Complex as it might be. There is only one solution to this problem, and that is the establishment of a state of Palestine in the borders of 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, the return of all Palestinian refugees to their free country, and the release of all Palestinian political prisoners from Israeli jails. The Palestinian people will never give up their struggle to free their own country from occupation as long as it takes. It is therefore the responsibility of the international community, the UNO and other organizations, and the freedom-loving people of the world to initiate concrete steps leading to the implementation of this solution. It is primarily the responsibility of the working class movement in all countries to mobilize mass popular support to this demand, to bring the maximum pressure upon all governments to express meaningful support to the Palestinian struggle, to bring pressure upon the UNO itself to initiate measures towards this solution. It is then our own responsibility to do our utmost to inform and mobilize people in our country in support of this just solution. This is the only course of action. Otherwise, war will never end in the Middle East. Thank you.